All right.
Well, welcome to Finding Heroes in Business, our weekly podcast that showcase people that are making a huge impact in their community and around the world, and businesses that have created things that are just making an impact on all of us. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Laurin Mariani. My name is Rob Herget. I am the founder and president of Boost Your Business and the host of the podcast. Laurin, let's get started on this. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what's happening in your world.
Thanks for having me, Rob. So I am a soul activator and psychic alchemist, which is probably a whole bunch of just fancy names for an intuitive person. I don't necessarily like the definition of labels of any kind because I think there's a limitation, but my purpose and goal daily is to inspire people to live in utter authenticity with themselves and to just completely, I truly believe that the moment we step into who we are, despite the negative that society defines as depression, anxiety, all of that kind of stuff, my concept is to embrace all of those because they are there to help us within our lives.
That's interesting. I've talked to a lot of life coaches and those that are trying to help us and improve our lives, and I've never heard that approach before. Describe it a little bit. Give me a couple of examples of what you're talking about.
So if we take depression and anxiety, for example, it's probably one of the most medicated symptoms in the world, where people are constantly being defined as depressed or anxious. And there's no one yet, I'm not claiming to have the cure, but, we have all these fancy remedies, things, retreats, all of that. And so I just came up with the concept that I wonder what would happen if I embraced it, having suffered. I am an anxious person, actually, and I have the capability of being depressed. And so the moment I acknowledged that, I felt that it no longer had power in our lives. And when I started to look a little bit deeper into it, I realized that the same way we have a physical DNA within us, our souls also have their own DNA. And the more I dug deeper, the more I found more information out. And I realized that it sat much better in a soul science sense of just validating and acknowledging that and being authentic, that this is who I am. I have a capability of being depressed and redefining depression, for example, in its entirety. So if we redefine depression, it is just a deep rest state and your body just shuts down, your mind shuts down. There's no self-hate in depression, if we're completely honest. It's just a complete and utter shutdown within us. And that's just, I believe, our soul reaching out to us to literally connect on a much deeper level. And the same thing for anxiety. There's a place in our society for anxiety, especially within the world that we're living in. And so we can take the same concept as that. Instead of actively fighting against anxiety and taking medication for that, just if we were to embrace anxiety in its entirety, we would soon find that actually there's nothing to be anxious about. It's just our soul contract needs us to be a little bit more cautious about what it is that we've done. And you normally find that people who are extremely anxious people are indecisive because they have learned that every decision they have made is not necessarily achieved the best outcome. And so instead of it, dealing with that, they then start making no decisions at all. And that's what ultimately leads to that anxiety.
So using anxiety as that example, what would some steps be? Obviously, we don't want to shut down. We don't want to not make decisions. What would some of the steps, what steps would you work with the clients that you're working with? What are some of the things that you would have them do?
So one of the things within my containers that I teach is once we've defined the soul DNA strands, and there's good, bad, and ugly, literally in those categories. But if we take anxiety, for example, I teach it almost as an equalizer, the same way, I don't know if radios these days have them, but there's an equalizer where you can balance out.
Back in the day they did. I'm not sure if they do anymore. Yeah.
Back in my my day.
My day too.
You know, you equalized where you wanted it at. And so I would teach somebody who is an anxious person, like, let's just set your anxiety to about 5%. So that the moment you feel that, because you build such a strong soul connection, the moment you feel that anxiety step in, you're able to go through a best case scenario and a worst case scenario. And I teach techniques about what does the best case scenario look like and what does the worst case scenario look like. So, you know, worst case scenario is ultimately death, isn't it? And it's a gory one, and it's the most morbid thing in the world. And yet, then I go the step further and I say, well, let's live that. Let's live that. Hypothetically, let's put it into a different dimension. Let's live it. And did you die? No. So once we've established that you made it through that and what all the possibilities were, and what can you actively problem solve to stop you being anxious. So, you know, for me, one of the things was, we have Lake Kariba here in Zimbabwe, and we jump on houseboats, which is probably your equivalent of yachts. And I'm terrified that one of my kids falls off the back as we're crossing over the crocodile-infested lake. So my thing is just to take zip ties with us, and I zip tie all the gates, because then I know that it's not a matter of a key. It's just a matter of taking a pair of side cutters and cutting those afterwards. And then I buy board games, and I sit with my kids on the, you know, on the top deck, and we just play board games, and I can see them. And if they need to go to the bathroom, I go with them on the pretense that I also need the bathroom multiple times on the trip, and whatever it is. And it's just a matter of killing that anxiety, and there's methods for it. But I think when we've labeled anxiety as something that needs to be medicated, you're then leaving yourself very few options, and that medication in itself has side effects.
Right, all sorts of side effects. I'm so fascinated by this whole soul DNA, because, you know, I'm no spring chicken, and I've never heard somebody talk about a soul's DNA. I'm a big believer in, you know, in relationships, you've got to fall in love with the soul, or that person's just frankly never going to be enough of you. But each of us having a DNA in our soul, it fascinates me. And I know in previous conversations we talked about hostility, and one of the examples was, you know, some of the best athletes that ever came on this planet. You look at them before their sport, and none of them are smiling. None of them are smiling. You know, the rougher the sport, the more the growl. But even in pretty tame sports, none of them are typically smiling. They have a face on them that if you didn't know what they were about to do or didn't know who they were, it's hostility that you see.
Absolutely.
And they have embraced that, and it makes them better people. So I see your theory, and I see it in real life. What are some other examples? We've got hostility. We've got, you know, what are some other areas?
I had a conversation today with somebody about it, and I'm going to use my poor husband as the example. So as the guinea pig. So my husband is a very military man, and he does not have a romantic bone in his body unless it comes from Google or Pinterest. And so being a woman, we've been married, I think, I'm not a dates person, maybe 20 years this year.
You got to remember those dates. That's important.
No, I don't remember. And you know what? My authenticity, I don't even care to remember, but it's around 20 years that we've been together. And I spent probably about 10 years longing for this relationship that he would, you know, head over heels, and he would just surprise me. And why can't he be more romantic? You know, I've dated guys that were so romantic, and I craved that romance, and I absolutely had him, you know, and it was one of the biggest things we used to fight about. And when I birthed Soul DNA, I remember looking at him going, oh, that makes so much sense. I'm asking you for the physical impossible, you know, in your world. So unless it comes from Google and being an intuitive, I mean, Google's so freaking scripted, and so is Pinterest, so I can see it straight out of there. You know, it's not heart-led, and I can feel that disconnect with him. And so the moment I embraced, that he has no capability of achieving what I'm asking him to, because it is not physically part of him. And yes, he can learn it. Like I said, he can Google it. He can do all those things. But at the end of the day, it's just not going to be authentic, is it? And you feel that on the other side. We romanticize life so much that we've actually forgotten what authenticity looks like. So we start taking scraps. Oh, my husband bought me flowers. Oh, my husband did this for me. And it's not genuine. It's because you prompted him that morning, or you made a snotty comment, about, well, so-and-so got flowers and you just never get it for me. As opposed to just taking all the pressure off and just saying, hey, love, I understand you're not capable of that. So I need an element of that. So can you just once a month Google something and I'll take it? Because I understand what it took for him not being that, to go through the multitude of things on freaking Pinterest to choose the right one that is going to meet the predetermined criteria I have.
Interesting. Is that how you handle it when two people have completely different DNAs? You kind of put a little compromise in there and say, this is what I'm looking for. I know it's not typically you, but this, can you do like little baby steps toward it? Is that how you solve it when two people in a relationship are completely different as far as their DNAs?
Each one of us has our own soul DNA, the same way we have our physical DNA is different. But I certainly am not a massive fan of compromise to that extent within a relationship, because I believe that ultimately there's an element of sacrifice, and it depends where your expectations are at. I think majority, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail for this, but I think a lot of women have a very high expectation of what men are physically capable of and mentally capable of. And I think that within that, there's a lot of breakdown within relationships. And that's why I don't like compromise, because I think women push it too far. I know that men can also push it, but I generally think that the amount of pressure in today's world, certainly when I was growing up, it wasn't around that much. I'm not saying women need to be barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. That's not it at all. But I think that there's so much woman empowerment in the world that we've taken it maybe a step too far.
So
I'm not a massive fan of compromise. I think it would just be great to say, can I spend the rest of my life with a person that will never, ever be romantic? That's how I look. We got to the point of divorce, and I had to sit down once I birthed this program and say, this is who I am. And we laugh about it now. We have a saying in our house, you do you. And as long as
someone told me that yesterday, in fact, on Facebook, they posted something. He says, "You do you," and I actually had to give her a love for it, because I love that saying. I've heard it a couple of times.
Yeah, and so we just, if I say to him, I was prompted to travel 9 hours tomorrow to go and watch my daughter's hockey game, and I booked a couple of meetings in that, and he was like, well, it doesn't work for me. And but he said, ultimately, you do you, and I'll pick it up. We'll make a plan, and whatever it is, if I want, we're so opposite in so many ways, but I think the concept of when two souls can identify each other from a soul perspective, and you can allow that connection to be there. I wrote another program actually about defining your tribe. And I speak in that program about how when you have people within your life, mentors, soul friends, nothing box friends, hobby friends, all that is left within your relationship is intimacy and playfulness and companionship. And so that's where we've got to the point within our relationship that it's back to dating almost, because there's such solid structures around us that he no longer needs to be. If I tell him about my business, he just won't get it. He's a military man. If he tells me about his, I just don't care. And, I love that he loves his job, but it's not my world. And
right.
So I don't need to sit there and suffer through it.
Is soul DNA, is that the same thing as when it comes to relationships as the love languages, or is that a completely different animal?
Completely different thing. Do you know that love languages was actually what got me started on the initial step of soul DNA, because I'm not an affectionate person in the slightest, and my husband's love language was affection, or is affection, when we read the book together. And I can't tell you, I used to sit there thinking, just kill me now. Just kill me now, as he held my hand. And it's not that I don't love my husband. I just, within my soul DNA, I'm not an affectionate person. I'm a very nurturing person. I'm a very caring person. I'm a very gentle person. I'm a very giving person. But that actual, like, connection, I'm not an affectionate person. And that's what got it started, is I thought, this book speaks about giving a language that I physically cannot give without feeling a part of me starting up to build resentment.
So there is some of that. I mean, you've got to have those love languages as part of your soul DNA for it to work. Correct? I mean, is that what you're?
I still don't think so. I discredited. There's merits to it. I'm not going to discredit an entire book that's worldwide. Certainly not prepared to do that. And I think whatever works within a relationship, but certainly for my husband and I, it was not something we could relate to, because for me, quality time involved him being romantic, which he couldn't give. And so for us, there was just there was no authenticity either side of the giving spectrum of our love language. It was just too hard and too painful. And we just both felt violated. And it's a strong word, violated. I speak about souls being violated within the container.
I'm just really fascinated by this. So, okay, as a business person and as someone who would love to have a new relationship in my life, is there in your teachings or any golden nuggets that you have, how does somebody determine or at least get a glimpse of somebody else's soul DNA? How would I know what somebody's soul DNA is?
I found this on the web. For is there in your teachings or any golden...
Hold on. Oh my Lord. Okay, that will be edited. All right, so let me kind of start from here, and I'll edit all that out. But so as a business person, as somebody that would love to have a relationship in my life, how do I understand somebody's DNA? How can I look into it and understand that their soul DNA?
I think once you've done the actual program itself, there's a much deeper understanding to be able to spot those things, because you then show up in that authenticity. It's so much clearer to then see somebody else's thing. But I always say to people, there's recently a guy that I met him probably about 18 months ago, actually, and he asked exactly the same question. And I said to him, find your savage. And so he was like, what? And I said, find your savage. Find the person that you can just be. There's none of this pretenses. There's nothing. I said, on your first date, eat spinach and see if she tells you there's spinach in your teeth. And if she doesn't, next. It's just find that complete and utter authenticity. I mean, that's how my first date with my husband, that's exactly what I did. And he instantly was like, oh, you've got spinach all in your teeth. And I was like, he's a win. He's an absolute keeper if that's where he's going to. And it was because I think we again, life is so romanticized that there's all this pretense. Do you know, if you watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the movie with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, they, at the start of their relationship, there was probably about 4 minutes into the movie, there's complete and utter authenticity. And then suddenly something changes. And, they start living this pretense of fake jobs, fake love, fake dinners, fake all of that. And then there's an almighty explosion, isn't there? And at the end of it, you have to come clean and bare yourself and say, well, I don't like my steak cooked like that. And actually, I don't ever want to hang my towel up. I never want to hang my towel up. How my towel gets hung up, that's my husband's job. And I was just like, it's never going to hang itself up. Like, it's not my job. It's just not my job. And so it's not a disrespect. It's not that I'm a pig. It's none of those things. I'm extremely OCD and perfectionist, but a towel is just, and a laundry basket. What the hell do you need that for?
Huh.
It's just, it's stuff like that. But when you show up in that authenticity, and that's just not my priority, but I have tons of other good qualities, you get to make a very educated decision about, can I live with the you of you do you?
And it's interesting because it sounds like it's maybe that's why relationships don't succeed so often, because it sounds like a difficult process to kind of be your genuine self, and then your soul DNA complement or at least cohabitate with somebody else's soul DNA. Is that a fact? I mean, is that
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And I mean, you think our dating process is all on pretense. You dress up in your finest kit, you go to the fanciest restaurant that you can afford at the time. A couple of months down the line, you take a weekend away together, and you show up as the best version of yourself after a really hard day at work, because love, I mean, that's what being in love does. That's what the initial stages are. And then, you get married, and everything is almost that pretense. You've had one or two big fights till then, and, but we get married, and then 4 or 5 years down the line, you physically cannot keep that pretense up any longer. And so it's almost like your soul DNA strands start rearing their heads, because, hey, I'm born to live an authentic life. And that's where we get into arguments of, well, you've changed. No, I never changed. I maybe started dating you, and that was where the change was. And I'm just going back to who I am. And so for me, I think any one of us in a pressured situation or a heated situation will go back to the safest place within our soul DNA. And that's normally what I define as the ugly column, which is your irrationality or your anger or your complete shutdown. Because ultimately, your ugly is defending everything within your good. There's no one else to defend it.
So how do we avoid doing that? Or we can't?
No, absolutely. So within it, I teach about triggers and how that trigger process is. So once your soul DNA strands are identified, there's everything that is in the bad column, whatever that may be, from irrationality, impatience, intolerance. I'm just trying to think of what mine are. I get very snappy very quickly. I can't remember what I would have defined that as. But there's certain things where I shut down, I just start shutting down. Those are all triggers. So the minute, I feel that feeling, I'm like, well, where's that come from? And 9 times out of 10, it will be my people pleaser that screwed up. I've agreed to something that actually I don't have the time for, nor do I care to do it. It's somebody gave me a sad sob story, and I bought into that sad sob story because I wasn't paying attention. And so now suddenly I'm snapping at my husband, snapping at my kids, snapping at my work is irritating me, my hair is irritating me, and it just skyrockets until I jump into my, my ugly column. And at that point, my anger and irrationality, and it's always taken out on the wrong people. But, when you think of massive arguments that you've had within your life, it always boils down to, well, I put too much on my plate and I didn't mean to do that. And, well, I directed it at you by mistake and I'm so sorry. And so the triggers are there, and that's part of depression. Depression normally sits in the bad and the ugly column. There are times where it can sit in your good column, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong for which it sits in, but normally for people who suffer with depression and anxiety, 9 times out of 10, it's just that they've given too much of themselves, or, there's a glitch in the system. I explain glitches in the system within the program.
It's interesting. For me, the only time I ever blow up is when I'm attacked. I can handle someone being, whatever, but once I'm attacked, particularly if I know I'm not the responsibility, and I'm one that I have no problem apologizing. A lot of people can't apologize, don't ever take responsibility. I'm complete opposite. I'll take responsibility if I did something wrong, but I can't ever handle being attacked, particularly when I know it had nothing to do with me to begin with.
Yeah.
So
But at
it's
that point, it's a violation of your soul. So you'll probably find that your integrity, one of your soul DNA strands would be integrity. And at that point, the moment somebody questions your integrity, we're just not even going to the bad column, actually. We're just jumping in and absolutely annihilating you.
right.
At least that's the point I go to with integrity. I don't take kindly to, I don't mind people questioning my work at all. I don't mind people questioning my beliefs. There's an energy, though, in which I prefer it's done in. And so when it's a direct, and especially if somebody doesn't know anything about, your area of expertise, or at that point, just shut up. You're just going to die on your seat.
It's like politics here in the United States. There's certain conversations you just, sometimes you just have to say, you know what? You be you and I'll be me, and we won't discuss that.
And I think that's one of the things, that I'm a naturally passionate person. A lot of people mistake it for me being aggressive, and it's not that at all. But I think one of the things is that we've never necessarily been taught to respect individuality. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about Soul DNA is there's no two that are the same. And so you'll find that generally you're drawn to people who have very similar DNA strands, or if we take it a step further and we go to, the next container within your tribe, you try and find people with similar hobbies or similar, mentors or stuff like that. But we're just not taught how to be an individual within our society. So the minute somebody doesn't agree with our opinion, at that point, it's a train smash, isn't it? And when you say, you do you, it's an insult. When in fact, it's like, no, 100%, there's merit to your work. I don't need to buy into that.
Yeah, and particularly in my country, in the States, it tends to be a lot more intense than other areas around the world. I don't know why it is. I think it starts in our education system. We kind of fit kids in a box, and if they don't fit in that box, they are, treated differently. And it just, I think you're dead on. I think teaching, particularly at a younger age, teaching kids that individuality is a good thing, not a bad thing, would be, I think it'd be a huge solution to a lot of our world's problems. But, so give me an example. You've been doing this a while. Give me an example that just of a case that just absolutely blew you away with your work with somebody.
So, one of my favorite cases, there's two of them that I ran simultaneously, was I worked with somebody that was bipolar, somebody that was schizophrenic.
Two different people.
Two different people, yeah. They just happened to fall into within a couple of months of each other. Bipolar, obviously, there's no trigger. It's just a switch that goes off and totally different person. And then schizophrenic is just the multiple personalities that come in. And this, the one lady had 13 different personalities, and it fascinated me. The whole thing fascinated me. And eventually, I got to learn all those 13 personalities. And over time, I realized I could identify with all those 13 personalities. I have no ability to lie to myself. Somewhere there's a spectrum. If it isn't already there, I don't know, where I would be at 100% on that spectrum indicator, where there is just no ability to lie to yourself. And so, like you say, where you accept responsibility. And so I asked myself really hard-hitting questions. Can you identify with it? And 100% I could. And it intrigued me. And so that was one of the things of teaching those personalities that they no longer needed to serve that person, and that teaching that person. And it's within the steps within the program of, you can say goodbye now, because she's going to honor her soul, and every time she feels a trigger, she's going to put a boundary in place. And every time she feels this rear its head, she's going to start protecting herself. So it's almost like the original version takes responsibility and starts protecting.
It's like a reset button.
And Yeah, absolutely. And just, I think there's so much to unlearn that I write it within my container and I say, I want you to speak before you think. I don't want you to have to think about it. I want you to speak before you think, because when you speak before you think, only honesty comes out. And the consequences are the consequences. Yeah, you'll have no friends for a little while. Yeah, you'll break up your family for a little while, but ultimately, you're going to find your people that align with who you are, and you're going to be happier for it. And so this notion of, oh, we have to keep our families intact, and oh, don't tread on toes and mind what you say, and that was the thing. And so getting back to the 13 personalities was just a similar concept about just start saying what it is that you really want. If you do not want, to go to that lunch, just say thank you, but no. You don't need to give a reason. It's in total violation of your soul. You're a painfully shy person. Why the hell would you go and have lunch with 20 people? That you don't know. For what? And so the bipolar person, very similar situation where they had just learned repeatedly over time. There is, I believe, an element of chemical imbalance, but that goes with it. I think that there's 100% that, but many times we don't even rectify the chemical imbalance, we just mask it. And so the moment we get our hormones in track, we get our healthy eating on track, exercise back on track, and that kind of thing, generally we can come off that medication. And with the bipolar person at that point, it's just a matter of you've been violated so many times that the only way for you to get out of a situation now where everybody runs in fear and brands you as crazy is to throw on an episode. Because it's only when you throw the episode does everybody finally give up and walk away. And so it's almost like a Big Brother system where the 13 personalities, one just kept literally being born. The more people got to know the last version and violated the last version, well, then let's just breed an uglier one, and let's just put in an uglier one. And so that's generally the personalities just get weirder and weirder and stronger.
And what were you able to do for these people? What was the end result?
So literally down to the 3 personalities that I teach within, or three personalities. I think we all have multiple personalities, but within the 3 strands of the good, the bad, the ugly, and teaching them this is what your triggers are. This is how you put in a boundary. This is why you put in a boundary. This is what connecting to your soul really feels like. It's not meditation. I don't have the attention span to freaking meditate. So I can't teach meditation. And so the more real I became with them, the more they were like, oh, we thought that you have to spend half an hour meditating, and we thought we've got to do a yoga retreat, and we thought, mind, body, soul connection was this. And I was like, absolute bullshit. It's none of those things. You do what you do you. If rocking out to music in the car is where you connect to your soul, go for it. I don't care. Just do it.
And so you were able to get rid of 10 personalities?
Yeah.
And how did you actually...
Yeah,
I don't know that much about that issue, but how do you actually get those personalities out to meet them in the first place? Is it by luck?
You trigger them. No, you trigger them.
Okay, and you had to figure out what those triggers were.
It will be a soul DNA strand. So that was the thing, is like, if humiliation was one of the things that could be triggered, I would humiliate them and up would pop another personality. And I'd be like, okay, so you're called humiliation. And it wouldn't. I mean, it would have a human name and a human characteristic and all of that. And I was like, well, let's just call you humiliation. And I'd write that in my notes. And, if I went into something, ridicule would be another one where, they're 2 very different things, but we put that in there. If shyness was one of them, but, let's attack shyness here. Or curious, let's attack your curiosity. And so each one of these things would be, if somebody was quirky, if you're weird can be a soul DNA strand. If you're just weird, then you're weird. And that's okay.
Right. Some of the most successful people in the world, probably are considered extremely weird. So,
there we go.
And what would a medical treatment be like? I mean, you did this all through your program without medication. For someone with 13 personalities, what typically in society would they have had to go through?
It
A lot of
was
medication,
strange.
I'm
She was,
assuming.
well, yeah, I mean, she would get to the point where she was heavily sedated. So by the time, I mean, you imagine having a conversation, and I guess it's like somebody with Tourette's. That would be the easiest thing, where there's multiple tics and triggers and all of those things. In fact, I dealt with somebody with a form of Tourette's, and they put it down as epilepsy, where they would throw themselves back as a tick almost. And his strand was humiliation, actually. And I remember, I mean, it took me about 6 weeks, and I was actually in another appointment, and I came across, I mean, I was busy birthing soul DNA at that point, so it wasn't necessarily something that was 100%. And I was very honest with people and said, listen, this is what I'm doing. Happy to have you as a guinea pig. I need your consent, though, to do it. It may fail, it may work. And I called him in. He lived, fairly far away, and he sat on the couch, and I said, how's your week? And he said, oh, on Tuesday at this time, I had another episode, and I'd written it in my diary when I named humiliation. And it was the exact time as him. And he said, I had another episode. And I said, I want to show you something. And I said, your thing is humiliation. And so he instantly went into that, and his tics started severely. And it was terrifying. I mean, I'm not a medical professional. Mine is just intuition based. And so I was like, can we deal and talk about humiliation? And, part of the thing was his sexuality in that. And so the more I discussed it, best case, worst case scenario, went through all of that and dealt with it. I think he's had 2 episodes now in 6 years only.
Wow.
And he was having multiple a month. It was insane.
Wow. And what was the outcome with the person that was bipolar? You said they were on medication. Are they still on medication?
So there's none of them. None of them are on medication. That's what's so mind-blowing. Is just, I think part of soul DNA is being able almost to access a 5D. In fact, it's not almost. Part of soul DNA ultimately, a year down in the program, is being able to connect with a 5D world where you're that in tune with your soul. You see stuff from a very different perspective, a much higher perspective. And so you realize that you have the ability to heal your own body. You eat according to what you eat, soul-based food, I call it, where you wake up in the morning and your soul is craving carrot cake. And so you just can't get carrot cake out your mind. Honor that carrot cake feeling and just go and eat the carrot cake. Your soul, I do not believe, is going to tell you day in and day out, eat a burger, eat a burger, eat a burger. It's just not. You can, somebody call me out on your podcast even, but if you were to sit with yourself honestly and just eat McDonald's every single day, there's going to be a part of you that rears its head saying, hey, do you really think you should eat that? I'd really like a salad. And you're like, no, shut up, I want the burger. And so, soul DNA, whilst we're fascinated by the DNA strands and all of that, it ultimately leads you to a point where you're making soul-based decisions about your body, soul-based decisions about food, soul-based decisions about your business, and you lead the soul-based life that has the ability to heal itself, where there is no need for medication.
Does gut feeling have something to do with soul, your soul talking to you? I mean, is that 2 different subjects?
Do you know, I was asked this question earlier on this week. There's definitely a correlation to it. It's something I'd need to explore, actually. It's not a question that I've been asked before, and I haven't had a chance to check it out. There's definitely relevance to it. But I think, and I would tend to say yes. But it's a bit more than that, because I think gut feelings are when you put your soul into a situation and say, part A, part B, which one are we taking? Whereas, connection with soul is about saying, hey, I showed up today, and where do you want me to go? And it's that first thought about, hey, book a river trip. Yeah, okay, cool. And so you book that river trip thinking, well, I don't know why the hell I'm going on a river trip, but sure, let's go. And you end up meeting the woman that you didn't know you wanted and needed, but she's there, and what the hell, when your gut was saying, well, that's the dumbest idea. You've got to cancel all your podcasts and everything, and it just doesn't make business sense.
So maybe fate doesn't exist. Maybe it's all about soul DNA. Soul DNA is putting us in spots that we used to call fate. Who knows?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, when we talk about fate, it's like things that are just, there's no two ways that fate exists. My husband and I were in the same circle of friends for 6 years before we met each other. How does that happen? It's almost as though we were invisible to each other.
Yeah, I don't know.
He walked into the same group of friends, and I was like, oh, there's my husband.
It's a really interesting thought. What about setbacks or failures in your business? Any examples of things that just didn't go the right way and had you maybe pivoting your business or pivoting what you were doing? Any setbacks at all that you can think of that you want to describe?
So if I think, this was not always my career. I came out of school, I qualified in hotel management. I then decided now I wanted to specialize in chefing. After that, I got to the head of my game within our country, and there's no challenge there. I love being challenged. So I took out, and then I moved to the UK, and I wanted a job with no responsibility to feel what that looked like. I was 18 when I was at the top of my game in the country. It was just a personal goal. I hit that goal and moved to the UK, and I was like, I wonder what it would be like to be nothing. So literally moved papers from this side of the desk through data entry to that side of the desk, and I loved that entirely, and then worked my way up because obviously I got bored, and then moved back to Zimbabwe, started interior decor, and did extremely well. It was one of the first interior decor companies within the country at that time, and it was huge, absolutely massive. And then I had complications with my daughter, and I shut that business down, went back to catering. And I couldn't understand at the time, was that failure? Would I ever find a career? And I remembered a night my husband and I got horribly drunk together when I first moved back, just before I started up my decor. And I said to him, one day I'm going to help people and I'm going to heal people. He said, that's stupid. And I was like, okay. And so when I look at that, I think my career had to fail in every single aspect because my sole contract was to do the work I'm doing now. And so when I look at the chefing aspect, I mean, hotel management's a whole world on its own. That is just a whole industry on its own, a selfless industry. And I think that's where I learned boundaries. And I learned as a woman in a man's industry how to have a voice. And it's not personal, right? You're all just competing for the same job. So I had to learn to grow, broad shoulders there. When I look at my interior decor company, that was definitely all business. There was no soul involved in that. That was just all business. And so when I look at, the business that I'm in now, there's elements of my failures that have to come through. And, I wrote down something a couple of months ago. I problem solve massively. I have a huge big space outside, and I bought those big industrial brown paper rolls. I don't know if you get them there, you get them here. And I roll this thing out, and I've got a mind map, huge. There's so many possibilities, best case, worst case, all of this. And I lost my temper and I wrote failure equals success. That's what my soul wrote, failure equals success. And I stood up and I was like, wait, how? And I sat and I sat at this thing for days. And I thought, let me unconsciously write. And when I fail, I learn. When I learn, I get back up. When I get back up, I succeed. And I wrote this months ago, and I was like, are there failures then?
It's all learning lessons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think within any business, I now get a little bit nervous when things are running too smoothly for me. I get nervous because I'm like, well, I'm bored.
I'm the same way.
I love the mental challenge of problem solving. I absolutely love when a business comes to me. I was approached today actually for a small business, and they said, listen, we're struggling in this area, and it's within a restaurant. And I was like, I'm in. and what are your charges? No, I don't want to charge you. There's a part of my brain at the moment that just needs to problem solve your issues for you. So for me, thanks. I'm in. See you, next week. This is my availability.
Huh. That's awesome. No, it's true. Actually, one of my favorite days is the day before going on a vacation. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but it is probably the most work you'll ever do in your entire life, the most efficient you are, because you've got to get everything done before you go out of town. And I'm telling you, it is for me, it's amazing, because I've got to think everything out. I've got to plan it. I've got to do things that I'm not a great detail person. I always like having assistants to do the detail stuff. I'm a big picture person, but the day before a vacation, it is amazing how much you literally, if you could do that every single day, your business would go through the absolute roof. But most people don't do that.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, you talk about a vacation. My impromptu trip, I mean, I'm jumping straight onto another podcast straight after you. And so my daughter, my 10-year-old's like, Mommy, I forgot to do this project. My husband's taken the 2 kids out tonight. And so I'm like, well, love, you're only in for 20 more minutes and you've got a project. So I was like, right, I'll do your project. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just generic learning. She's not learning anything from it. So let me whack that out and cook dinner and organize for the 3 a.m. start tomorrow and get the laundry done. And, like 6:15, I was like, well, that was the most epic 3 hours of my life. I've done more today than I probably, have done in a single day this week by multitasking and getting ready so that I don't have to stress.
And don't you feel, at least for me, I actually feel less tired on days like that or on times like that, just getting it done and getting in there and doing it than normal days where I'm not as intense, but I just feel much more tired at the end of the day. I don't know what that is, but...
Well, I think it's also just I think you sleep better, you feel better, you've achieved.
You've accomplished,
so
right.
It is, and at that point, there's the endorphins that are there for the energy. There's a multitude. There's your personal satisfactions, your failures, your fears, your dreams, your hopes, your milestones, whatever it is. You just, I write about it within the container. I say, there are days where you go to bed knowing you were a star fucking player. And there's an energy that comes with that, where you lie there and there is not, in fact, I did I can't remember if it's in a masterclass, but I spoke about, I struggled with depression for a long time. And I remember making an agreement saying, this is it, I'm out. Like, I've got 1 day left. Tomorrow morning, I just don't want to wake up. I've got 2 kids and a husband my marriage is failing. And I'm just out. Like, whether it's suicide, whether it's, that I just don't care, but somebody kill me. And I remember the absolute panic at what needed to be done. The Tupperware cupboard needed to be sorted. My husband would never understand that system. He would never understand the kids' wardrobe. So I needed to sort that out. I didn't want him tidying up my desk. I wanted to leave everybody notes. I had things I needed to say to people. And so this list was born, and this urgency to experience my day to the best of its ability was born. And so I live my day knowing that tomorrow is not guaranteed. And the moment I live my day knowing tomorrow is not guaranteed, my production level is through the roof, because I don't want to leave here knowing, well, I could have done it. I just chose not to. And so it was just an instant mindset change for me of, well, I only have today. None of us is guaranteed tomorrow.
It's funny you should say that, because, and I've told a few people this, my biggest fear my entire life, mostly as I got a little older as a teenager, my biggest fear has always been I will never reach my ability. Or I just won't reach my ability. I know that I have so much in me, and there's so much more to go. That's always been my fear is, And a lot of people will say, well, you've had successful businesses, you've done this, you've done that, or what have you
No,
had?
it's not
You've had a
enough.
great life. It's all internal. It's I know, I know what I'm capable of, and I know I haven't gotten there. So what you just said resonates with me a lot, actually. So
Yeah, I do. I promise you. And when I go to bed at night, can I tell you, Rob, when you go to bed at night, I started doing this months ago. I have everybody on my team doing this. And I'm like, you need to thank your body for getting you through the day. It freaking played. When your feet hurt, you told them to shut up. They kept walking. When when you were hungry, you were like, no, it's not convenient for you to eat. Shut up and stop. And I said, you need to thank your body for what you've put it. I put my body through a lot. And so, thank it for what it is and allow it to regenerate. I give you permission to regenerate to your highest self so that I may achieve my highest self. My mind, I'm like, you need to filter out all the crap from the day. Everything that is not impacting my life, get out. Everything that I need to make notes on tomorrow that is going to drive me to be more than I was yesterday, stick in there until I don't need you anymore. So go and do what you need to do.
who's ever watching this, that is one of the best golden nuggets I've maybe ever heard. That I will practice that. That was.
That's what it was. I promise you. So, tonight, I finish work tonight at 11 o'clock. I am up again at 3 o'clock, and I've got a 9-hour drive tomorrow.
Oh.
And then 2 meetings, one after the other, and then a dinner. And then I'm staying with a really close friend of mine. So I'm probably not going to be, in bed much before 2 a.m. And then I get up. I'm up at 5 every morning. I'm up at 4 every morning. I've given myself a 5 o'clock, an hour lie-in. And then I'm traveling back, another 9 hours back. I've got to watch my daughter's next hockey game and then another 9 hours back. It is not an option to be tired. So I've had that conversation already with my body and said, I'm not discrediting how you're feeling right now, but I just don't have time to hear it. So I will give you Monday and Tuesday to rest, and we can lie on the couch and have popcorn. Because I need you to work at 4 times your capability over this, long weekend. It's just not. I don't want to hear it.
Absolutely, I love that. I love that. I will watch this several times because that is definitely something I will work on. Particularly getting some of the crap out of your head. Owning 15 businesses, there's always a lot of stuff going on in the head. So we only have a few.
It's a nice way to filter it.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing. We only have a few minutes left, but what was you went through all those careers, but I'm not sure I got an answer as to what really motivated you, and what was that kind of deciding factor that actually got you into what you're doing now?
I honestly, you'll resonate with this. There'll be other people where you have a conversation, and I crave deep, meaningful conversations. I craved crazy conversations. And my husband and I got to a point in our marriage. He looked at me and said, we were having an almighty fight. We actually were literally screaming divorce at each other. Sorry. And he said to me, who are you? And I was like, well, I don't fucking know. And he was like, and you want me to tell you who you are, and you don't know who you are. 6 months separation. We'll live in the same house. We'll co-parent. I will give you the freedom to do you. But in 6 months' time, I need you to tell me who you are. And that was the defining moment for me where I realized I need to be crazy. I don't want to be holistic, because there's a certain hat that comes with that in a cauldron. I don't want to be, I have such a strong business mind. I have such a strong spiritual connection. I love everything that I have strong dislikes as well. Why do I need to meet people? Why am I a people pleaser? I got to the point of, I had become everything I hated. That was my defining moment in starting this up. And so that's when I talk about soul-based decisions. That's one of my things, is that when you finally step into authenticity, everything else just flows. There is no, I never once advertised for a single client, and yet I was fully booked from the start. I never once, asked for so many things, and yet doors just open when you stand in, this is who I am.
I think that's, for anyone thinking about doing a business or anyone that's maybe struggling, really, honestly, anybody, including young people, authenticity. I mean, that is, that's maybe the one thing they should be teaching kids at a young age as well. And because they have it, I think most children have authenticity, or at least most of them at a young age, but don't realize not to get rid of it as they get older. Whether it's, I want to look like I'm somebody else, act like I'm somebody else. But no, I think that's amazing. This was one of the most interesting discussions I've had. I don't want to call it an interview because it really was a discussion. And I just, I thank you for the impact you're making. Obviously, you are a true hero in, not only just your community, but you're working with people all over the world. And I will make sure on the bottom of the podcast, people will have access to being able to reach you. What does the future look like? What are you looking to expand? Are you looking to evolve it into anything, or are you kind of where you want to be?
Infinitely possible.
Everything.
That is where I'm at.
Okay.
Everything and nothing. Everything and nothing. Because do you know what my thing is I think I've given myself, people have given me labels. In fact, it's one of the things I'd love to offer your audience is a labels, masterclass, life beyond labels. And it's the concept of a label, and to say at the end of the year, I want to be here, for me is a limitation. So I have a soul end goal, and in an energetic sense, this is what I want my heart to feel like, and this is where my personal growth needs to be at. So I put it into an energetic term, because I think the minute I put it into a physical thing, I feel suffocated by my own, it's like saying, oh, I'd love, when you're starting off a business, for people that struggle, it's that whole concept of, if only we had $100 more every month. You're going to work to earn that 100. It's going to take you 6 months to earn that 100, and you're going to achieve it and think, well, that's it. I mean, that's what I had on my goal, right?
Well, how many times have you heard from your children or friends, I'm going to be this, or I'm going to do this when this happens? It's always, this is going to make me, either better or harder working or smarter or whatever it is. But I'm sure I've said it at some point in my life. I guarantee you my kids have. And I've told them the same thing. I'm like, well, enjoy what you're doing along the way. Focus on what you're doing along the way. Then you're going to grow into whatever that person is. And that's what you're talking about, correct?
I always ask the question, and then what? So what
Great
happens
question.
And then what? And so, 9 times out of 10, my kids or my clients will look at me and be like, well, then I'll relax. And I'll be like, so you work that hard to sit on your ass? You think that you're going to be the same person you are now after you've gone through that amount to get there? I kid you not, you're sitting on your ass. So you're not going to get there until you can define what you can do, and then what?
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Well, we have come to the end. I more than appreciate you having you on the show. It's been great for me. I have learned so much, and I will be watching this podcast several times. And I thank you for your time and your efforts. Again, why don't you share with the audience your website, how they can reach you? And I know you have a program if somebody's interested in really delving into their DNA soul.
Yeah, so my website is laurinmariani.com, and the Soul DNA website is on there. I'm not too sure if the site is under construction. It should all be up to date, but everything is on there for it. We're actually going to be running a masterclass at the end of End of July, I believe. I'm not very good with my dates. I just get sent them on a piece of paper, and I wake up every morning and check that piece of paper. But I'm almost certain at the end of July, there will be a masterclass that's out for a life beyond labels. And it's just the power of removing all the labels so that you can just start and kickstart that journey. And it's insane, we have so many labels of rape and trauma and domestic violence and abuse and depression, anxiety, and I'm just like, they're man-made concepts, honestly. It's a sad story in that, but we just need to get over it.
Well,
So
I definitely, definitely
when you
share
talk
that
about
with
the
me,
athletes,
and I'll share it with my
the
audience.
The athletes, literally just woke up and was like, that didn't define me. Let me put my own label on myself. That's the thing. They still need soul DNA, because they'll be the insignificant. They still feel that feeling of insignificant. They still feel that feeling of, a much deeper connection. I'm not disputing that. But at the same time, they just removed labels from their lives. That's how people, successful. I'm not defined by anybody other than my own soul.
No, I think that's...
So I'll share all those details. And also on my social media handles, there's a Facebook thing. In fact, yesterday, we talk about crazy. Yesterday, I was something, irritated me yesterday on authenticity. And I was like, no one speaks about this kind of stuff, random tangents down a rabbit hole to see where it's going to take us, to expand our minds. So I did actually start a Facebook group yesterday, Infinitely Possible, because there's everything and nothing within that. And it's just probably me at my most authentic, crazy self, a version that, sometimes gets toned down by your work because you've got to be professional in some aspect.
Right.
There's that to follow. There's so many social media handles to follow as well. And there's tons of free content on that and inspirational content. I think July sees me channeling a lot and a lot more lives.
Okay, well, I will definitely get that from you, and we'll share it on the description in the podcast, because I would love to have people being able to follow you and reach out to you and so forth. But again, thank you very much. And for those that are listening, be a hero in your own business, be a hero in your own community. Let's all make an impact and make the world a better place, and let's keep learning from each other. So, Laurin, thank you very much. It's been a great discussion.
It's been amazing. Thank you very much, Rob.
Have a fantastic week, and you all take care.
Ciao.